My name is Disha. My EDX username is Disha_Jangid and my GitHub username is Disha Jangid. I am recording this presentation on July 26th, 2025. Today I'll be discussing a critical zero-click account takeover vulnerability that was discovered and reported on November 10th, 2024. The vulnerability is particularly significant because it represents a complete failure in passwordless authentication systems, allowing attackers to take over any user account without any interaction from the victim. I chose this incident because it perfectly demonstrates the catastrophic consequences of subtle flaws in authentication systems. This vulnerability directly relates to multiple course modules we have studied, particularly open authorization implementation, session management, and web application security principles. What makes this especially compelling is the simplicity of the attack vector. Despite being technically straightforward, it allowed complete account takeovers without any victim interaction. This was discovered through ethical hacking and responsible disclosure via HackerOne's bug bounty program, showing how security researchers could protect users by finding these critical flaws. The vulnerable application implemented a passwordless authentication system using magic links. Instead of traditional passwords, users would receive a unique link via email that, when clicked, would automatically log them in. This approach is becoming increasingly popular as it eliminates password-related security issues like weak passwords or password reuse. However, this system requires extremely careful implementation. The security depends entirely on tight coordination between the front-end and back-end systems, secure token generation, proper validation mechanisms, and careful session lifecycle management. Any weakness in this chain can lead to complete authentication bypass. Let me walk you through how this authentication system was supposed to work securely. First, the user enters their email address on the login page. The server then generates a unique time-limited token and sends it as a magic link to the user's email. When the user clicks this link, it contains secure token that the backend is supposed to verify. Only after successful verification should the server create an authenticated session for that user. The entire security model relies on one critical assumption, that the token can only be used once and only after it has been properly validated by the legitimate user. This seems straightforward, but as we'll see, the implementation had fatal flaws that completely undermined this security model. Now let me explain exactly how this attack works. The attacker begins by initiating password reset requests for both their own account and the victim's account. Using tools like Burp Suite, they intercept the HTTP requests going to the password reset endpoint. By analyzing these requests, they identify critical fields containing user identification and session information. Here's where the vulnerability becomes apparent. The attacker completes the complete OTP verification flow using their own account, which gives them a valid authenticated session. But then they perform a session manipulation attack. They take their validated session and replace their own user identifiers with the victim's information from the earlier captured request. When they send this modified request to the server, the backend accepts it because it sees a valid session, but it processes the password reset for the victim's account instead of the attacker's account. The vulnerability stemmed from four fundamental security failures in the authentication implementation. First, the session fixation. The application was creating authenticated sessions too early in the process. Second, there was missing backend state verification. The server wasn't properly checking whether the user had actually validated their server email ownership by clicking the magic link. Third, the system was granting sessions without confirming email ownership. This meant that just initiating the password reset process was enough to create exploitable session states. Finally, there were insignificant security controls, no CSRF protections to protect against cross-site request forgery, and no binding tokens for specific browsers, IP addresses, or device fingerprints. The impact of this vulnerability cannot be overstated. An attacker could take over any user account simply by knowing their email address. No social engineering, no phishing, no victim interaction whatsoever. This represents a complete failure of the authentication system. The development team implemented comprehensive fixes to address all the root causes I mentioned earlier. First, they redesigned the session lifecycle. Second, they enhanced token security by implementing proper JWT signing for token integrity. Third, they added device and session building mechanisms. Finally, they implemented additional security controls, including CSRF protection to protect cross-site attacks. This vulnerability teaches us several critical lessons about secure development practices. That we must test abuse cases and edge scenarios, thinking like an attacker rather than just testing happy path scenarios. This case study perfectly demonstrates several core concepts from our cybersecurity course. We see open authorization implementation flaws in how the authentication tokens were handled, session management failures in the premature creation of the authenticated sessions. Thank you for watching.